Donald Trump continues to do very well in the polls, especially now in New Hampshire. According to the results of a new WBUR poll released this morning that surveyed likely New Hampshire voters likely to vote in the election, Trump is still ahead of everyone. And he has an even bigger lead than he had before. However, what could hurt him later, before I really drill into the numbers, is that Marco Rubio, according to the same poll, happens to be the most likable out of everyone. Now that's interesting. Now let's get into some numbers, as I said. Now, Donald Trump has got about a 23% lead. No, not 23% lead. He's got 23% in the polls, which is a 5% increase since last month. Ben Carson is down to about 13%. Was actually down 3 points since the last poll. Rubio also is now tied with Dr. Ben Carson at about 13%. That's actually an increase of 2% since the last survey, so he's doing pretty good. Ted Cruz, about 8%, followed by Jeb and John Kasich at about 7%. Now, Bush, no change, but Kasich has dropped. So there's some of that. Christie is, of course, 6%. Rand Paul, 5%. Carly Fiorina at 4%. And interesting thing on Carly Fiorina, she's dropped 7 points. Her campaign, her poll numbers have dropped more than HP stock when she was working there. Ouch. Down in flames. Down in flames, there goes Carly Fiorina. As I said, much like the stock price of HP under her, management. I can't help it. I love doing that cheap shot. But all of the candidates, because remember, we still have about 15, still earned about 2% or less. Wow. Not good for everyone else. Now, Carson. Dr. Ben Carson has seen his favorability numbers go from a positive of 44 points, which is, the numbers were actually 63 positive, 19 negative, to 29 points. So 55 positive, 26 negative in this poll. So Dr. Ben Carson losing out on a lot of his favorability. Interesting. While Rubio, as I had mentioned earlier, has actually polled highest with 57 positive, 20 negative. And that's up. So I think this comes after a very, very strong debate performance by Marco Rubio and him not saying this crazy shit as Dr. Ben Carson. You remember, Carson says a lot of crazy things, but he says them very softly, very politely. He's still saying crazy shit, but he's not saying it as crassly as people like Donald Trump, for example. So very interesting. Now, among those who watched the debate, a strong plurality of 36% said Rubio performed the best, followed by 16% for Cruz and 9% for Trump. As far as the worst performance, 26% said Kasich most poorly, followed by 20% who thought the same of Trump and 16% for Jeb Bush. Now, what's interesting about this, even more, when it comes to specific policy, well, they talk about the reaction to the Paris attacks. Now, when it comes to expanding American troops in the Middle East, right? So, boots on the ground. 38% said the next president should send more troops to the region, while 28% said troop levels should remain as they are, and 22% said the next commander-in-chief should remove as many as possible. So that's interesting. That kind of shows that troop levels in the Middle East and terrorism, national security, that's going to be an issue. That's going to be a much bigger issue now after the Paris attacks in the election as it was before. We're sort of seeing a shift from domestic policy to more things like that kind of help out Trump, national security and immigration when we're dealing with the refugee crisis. So, but all in all, very interesting poll results. Donald Trump still on the top of the heap, increasing his lead over everybody else. But under that, we still got a good race.